So my name is Andrew Grathwall. I'm the ACX production coordinator, and my job here, my role at ACX is to oversee the audio quality assurance department. And so you pretty much have the best person here to tell you about how to pass the ACX QA process. So the what and the how. When we do a quality assurance check on your audiobook, what we're really only doing is verifying that the production quality is going to meet the demands of our customers. When you have your book QA'd, we are actually not listening to your audio by default. Believe it or not, we have automated software that takes care of the entire audiobook quality assurance process for us. And we will only actually ever listen to your audio if we have to verify that an error was caught and that it actually is going to be a problem. When we do a verification, we're checking for three major things. First of all, and most importantly, we're checking to make sure that your book is meeting the audio submission requirements. Has everybody seen that part of the ACX website? Yes. All right. If you haven't seen it yet, there is a printout of it in your packet. I believe it's the very first thing that you see in your folder on the left side. It is by far the single most important thing you can read to ensure that you're going to pass the QA process. We also do check, though, to make sure that the book is completed and that all the content's there. And we do also verify the metadata. We make sure that your narrator name is correct, that you're getting the proper credits out to the proper author, and of course the cover art, which you usually don't have any control over. So if we ever do identify a problem, the only thing we're really going to have to do is send you an audio review notice. And what that entails is a notification to both you, the producer, and the rights holder that we've found issues. And we identify the problems, usually with an exact time code or a file. We'll identify the solution to the problem. And if that solution doesn't help all the time, we also offer some general support. The QA team, as I'm sure anyone who would know if they've talked to them, they're always willing to go above and beyond to be able to help you solve the problem. They'll write a novel for you if they have to. They're really kind, and they're a really great team. So I want to stress that we do have a really good reason for doing the QA check. If it's ever been frustrating to have been rejected, I can totally understand. It's really not a good experience to pour your heart and soul into a narration only for it to have issues down the line. We're making sure that the audio is prepared to go through our systems so that everything goes on sale at the time that you want it to go on sale. And we also want to make sure that production quality isn't an issue, because if it is, that actually is a bad experience for you guys as well. Lower ratings, less money, it's never a good look. So in order to kind of overcome some of the initial hurdles when getting your book checked, there's a couple of basic audio tips you all will want to try to follow. The first thing I recommend is to always use headphones. I mean, there is pretty much never a time when you're making an audiobook where you'll have to use speakers. In fact, using speakers can be very detrimental to your book's success. You need to be able to hear a lot of the minor details in an audiobook in order to know what needs to be modified about it. And so on that note, closed back headphones and in-ear monitors are the two types of headphones we recommend. If you've ever seen, like in a recording studio, the very big headphones that completely encapsulate the ear, that's a closed back headphone. It basically will block out a minimum amount of ambient noise in your space. I want to warn you, though, that there are products made by companies like Bose which talk about noise canceling headphones. These are not recommended headphones to use for audiobook production. The noise canceling technology actually puts artifacts into the audio, and so we don't recommend that people use it because you might hear things that aren't there using Bose headphones. So if you are using Bose headphones, I will tell you this, the headphones that came with your Walkman are probably a better choice. They're great. They're great for flying on an airplane, blocking out noise when it's bothersome, but for the purposes of making audiobooks, you really have to make sure that you're having a clean sound. In-ear monitors, on that note, are of a similar nature, except they're very tiny and they actually go inside the ear canal, so they block a lot more sound. I recommend these for audiobook production. They're a little on the pricier side, but the beauty about in-ear monitors is that if you are willing to go to an audiologist, you can get your ears molded and have in-ear monitors that are made for your ears, so you'll never get tired of wearing them. They'll fit you perfectly. So when you're narrating for 4 hours at a time, an in-ear monitor is a very good solution to make sure that you're comfortable. When you do find a configuration that you like, my last suggestion is to always be able to save your preset. It's a strongly recommended thing that you guys all get into the habit of doing, is that when you find something that really works for your voice or for anyone else's voices, if that's the road you go down, definitely save a preset every time you're happy with what you've gotten, because that's a really good baseline for the future. And on the hardware side, it's also a really good idea to buy some electrical tape. You can use it as a reference when you want to know, okay, this is exactly where I stood last time and that got me a great sound. Or you can even put it on your microphone interface so that you know exactly where the knob was turned up in order to get that optimal recording quality. Those kinds of little things really help you guys in the long run. So to avoid any delays to your production, the first thing I recommend to do is to stay on schedule, and by that I mean make a production schedule. When you do your script review before you go into the process of recording, it's my recommendation that you plot out each day that you're going to be producing and figure out what the best and most appropriate amount of time is going to be to spend on each part of the process. And then the most important thing is to produce methodically, because audiobook production, like many other media production kind of adventures, is all about best practices and consistency. And on the note of consistency, backing up your work is super important. And you might have seen the ACX blog post I did a few days ago on that topic. If you don't back up your work and you lose some data, that's a really sure way to lose your schedule. So to kind of present this in a more user-friendly way, I've come up with this theme that I talk about now for audiobook production, which is the ACX Mile. You know, you go around the track 4 times, a quarter mile each, and the thing I want to impart on everybody here is that when you produce an audiobook, you have to complete the full lap before you can start the next one. Because anytime that you make a small error and don't catch it till later, it might mean that you have to go all the way back to the first step in order to fix it. But what I want to say is that in addition to this, we also need to remember that, like any good runner, you always have a warm-up and a cool-down period. And the same thing needs to be happening with audiobook production too. So the very first thing that we always need to go over when we do a new audiobook production is to do a manuscript preparation. And what that will entail is reading the whole thing, the whole book, getting a sense of all the different character voices you want to use, figure out any kind of pronunciation questions. How am I going to pronounce this word? Do I use old or new Cockney, all the technicalities that you as actors are trained to look out for. And it's very important when you're doing this to always field questions to your rights holder early, because the last thing you want is to have narrated the first 5 chapters of your book to learn that the main character is Scottish, or whatever might really throw you off. And so once you've done a full review, you should estimate the production time commitment that you're going to have to schedule. An experienced ACX producer will spend about 6 hours to complete 1 finished hour of audio. This is an experienced ACX producer who has been doing this for a long time. So you should be giving yourselves a minimum of 6 hours for each hour of audio that you need to produce. And so when you're drafting your production schedule, keep in mind that depending upon where you are, what time of day it is, there might be things that could hinder your recording. For instance, it's highly recommended that you never record during high noise periods. Low frequencies such as the rumble from cars and trucks on the road, refrigerators, AC systems, I'm sure some of you have really good microphones. This stuff is picked up really, really well by expensive microphones. And on the other side of that, higher frequencies like dogs barking, lawnmowers, emergency vehicle sirens, all of this stuff can be picked up by the microphone as well. So in order to never delay your production schedule, I recommend that you plot your recording time around those specific instances where you won't have these kinds of interruptions. So as an example of a production schedule that I just kind of set for myself, the example that I've done here is for an estimated 3-hour production. Where I've given myself a little Sunday break because I just happen to live on a busy street where there's going to be a street parade since it's summer every Sunday until September. And then 2 days of editing, 1 day of a pickup recording session, and then the mastery and delivery of the audio at the end of the week. So when you begin your recording setup, that's the start of lap 1, that's the starting gun. We recommend that immediately you set your recording settings to a 44.1 kilohertz sampling rate and to work in mono. If anyone's not aware of a sampling frequency, all you really need to know is that the frequency of your audio file is a determiner of where the audio can be played back. So if you submit the wrong sampling rate, that's an automatic issue for us. We have to send it back and ask that you re-encode it. If you have started out at some sampling frequency other than 44.1, don't worry, because the encoding guide that I talked about a few slides ago will actually show you how to fix that problem. So even if you're recording at some rate other than 44.1, it's not necessarily an issue. But we recommend you start that way. And on the mono issue, we recommend that you work in mono all the time unless it's like absolutely necessary. Because in our experience, and when I was an engineer at Audible Studios, my work down here, I have never in my career seen a need to do stereo. The other thing that we recommend is to start a new recording session for each day. A lot of producers I've met will do a new recording session for each chapter. I actually recommend that you do a full long record for the entire day you're working. That way, if you need to work on the audio, say for mastering purposes, you can more easily affect a larger portion of your audio because it's all right there in the same session in front of you. So my recommendation is to record each day and then split up the chapters at the very end of the production. A lot of people will do the chapter thing because it's logical, right? It makes sense from a listener's point of view, but from an acting and a production point of view, strongly encourage you all to just work on one long, day-long session and to never split your audio until the very last step. Some other considerations for recording. I would recommend that you record some clean room tone, and what that is you simply get up, hit record, and walk out of the recording space and leave it going for 30 seconds and come back. When you listen to the audio, you have to ask yourself, is this clean? By that I mean, are there any sounds in this room that would be distracting to the listener? So those sounds I referred to earlier, the street noise, the sirens, all that stuff, if it's in the room tone, will be very detrimental to your performance because you have to use room tone as a way to pace out your narration, and you don't want your dog barking to be in the room tone that you're using to pace in your narration recording session, because then the listener is going to hear every time you want to make a little pace change, whatever that sound was that was in the audio file. So you should be listening to your room tone at as high a volume as possible. And if you hear anything that doesn't sound like it should be there, you probably need to go back and record it again. So some remedies. If you find that your room tone is too loud, there's two things you have to listen for: low and high frequencies, generally. Low frequencies are actually easy to fix in the noise reduction environment. We're talking about a $45 accessory. It's pictured here. It's a Shure inline microphone accessory. What it does is it cuts low frequencies from your recording signal before it gets to your computer. It goes in between the microphone and the microphone interface. So this is basically an effective way to reduce rumble without any concern for how it's going to impact your narration. It deals with bass frequencies so low that most human voices don't actually go down that far. So you should feel comfortable using this as a solution to low frequency problems in your room tone. Now with high frequencies, if that's your issue, you kind of have to deal with that the old-fashioned way, just getting a bunch of moving blankets and acoustic pads. Any room can be deadened enough to reduce high frequency noise. It just requires time and money and patience. If you find that after all this, your room is still pretty noisy, I'd look into moving your recording space, because this check right now, if done correctly, will save you so much more time in the long run and make your production sound so much better. So if your recording system isn't up to this level at the moment, that's going to be the #1 contributor to your inability to pass through the QA process without problems. For audiobooks, the #1 and most important thing is the record. Everything else, you're enhancing an already good product. So this is the level where you really have to look at your setup and make sure that everything is up to snuff. So on that note, here's what you should do before you move on to your editing. You should make sure that your room tone is clean for every single day that you record. You should make sure that your audio is distortion free. By that I mean make sure that there's no clipping in the record that you've just done. Clipping is when you speak into the microphone too loud and you cause distortion. It's definitely not a good sound for customers, and it'll also make your mastering process a bit more difficult. And also, remember the noise floor issue. We want to make sure that it's just barely audible, because if we're hearing the room tone too well, it's really going to dampen your mastering efforts later on.